Hi folks, welcome back, and I've been in this position before in front of this thing. I feel it's time we need to get cracking and finish this bike off and get my son rolling on it. So today what we're going to do is look at getting the gear cables on, and if I've got time, get the chain on. And then all I've got to do is get some bar tape on this beast, and it's good to roll. So I've got a bit of Jerry Rafferty on, Steelers wheel, because I'm stuck in the middle with you. Really shot to fame with that track, didn't it, on Reservoir Dogs. Jerry Rafferty, who had a solo career prior to that, and in fact he started off doing gigs in Glasgow with Billy Connolly in his first band, so obviously went their separate ways and different routes to fame, but so we'll have that in the background while we're tinkering. So first thing I want to do, before putting the chain on and before putting any gear cables into this rear derailleur, if we start with this, we just need to basically check that the limiter screws are in the right place on this rear derailleur. And what do I mean by limiter screws? I mean on this particular model, the limiter screws are here and here, and set correctly will limit the movement of the chain between coming off ahead of the front cog and coming off to the rear of the back one. Obviously what we want to do is encourage the chain to sit nicely within that cog range and not to jump off, down or off the back. It's much easier to be done without the chain in and without obviously the gear cable in, preferably, because you can see the full, once you got the cable in and tensioned, it might not allow the derailleur to extend beyond the limiter screw in the first place. So I find that the best thing to do is to check where we're at now. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking down the first cog, and I'm looking at the jockey wheels, and I'm looking for some alignment. So if I look at that, try and get as straight as possible. So that looks pretty good for the chain to be sitting in a line when that's mounted on that bottom cog and onto our jockey wheel. So that looks pretty good. And then obviously if I pretend that there's a cable in this rear derailleur and extend it out to its fullest position, I'm in a situation where that limit screw is just restricting the chain from getting up onto that back cog. So what I need to do is just maybe knock that out just a touch in order to allow it to flow out there. So if you see, if I replicate that movement again, if you watch this stop here and the limit screw end, as I push that rear derailleur out, it's obviously coming into contact with the end of that limit screw. So it stands to reason that if I back that limit screw off and allow this mechanism to move it up a little bit further, then the range of those jockey wheels will be extended out a little bit further, and obviously it will allow that chain to more effectively, because what's going to happen there is that the chain's not going to want to jump up onto that last cog, which would be a shame if you're going up a hill, because that's an easier cog to be on. Okay, so I think what I need to do then is just to literally get a little flathead screwdriver and just back that off a bit and see what happens. Okay, so all we need to do then is just literally, I think, if we back him off, oh, it's a little bit on the stiff side, which isn't a bad thing. You're not going to go wandering then with vibration, but that spring that's there sitting underneath this screw is there to do exactly that. Actually, is to restrict it from moving about, bouncing around. So if I just back that off, don't have to go crazy. What was that? Just a quarter of a turn or so. And then let's see where we've got to with that. Trying to video and look at where I'm putting my hand is a bit of a challenge, but bear with, caller. Here we go. So I'm pushing that to its fullest extent now. And that now is in perfect alignment with those jockey wheels. So when that chain's mounted and we pull on our derailleur, on our rear gear cable to its fullest extent, that's where it'll reach and no more. So it's not going to be pulling the chain off the back of that cog and into the spokes, but it will at least get us there when we're on a hill. Okay, so before we go threading our cable then, so obviously the idea is that we're going to thread the cable into this lovely simplex shifter, which we fitted on a previous video, and it's going to go in through there. Obviously the stop on the end of the cable is going to sit in there. By the way, this is a Campagnolo style cable as opposed to a Shimano one. A Shimano one, the actual end stop would be too fat for in there. So the Campagnolo's little tiny end to it, which will sit neatly in there, goes round and underneath that groove, which has been beautifully machined out of there. It'll travel down underneath the bike. Now, this is a little feature I wanted to show you because I've adapted this. So at some point in the past, when this frame was built, there were two grooves, two basically cutouts, one here and one a bit further back, where I've got that, can you see that plastic cable guide? It's like a pair of cable guides with a section in the middle to throw a screw through into a frame. Well, that was on I think it was off a Giant out of memory, a more modern bike. Well, this bike had two great big holes in it. You could basically see the bottom bracket through it. Back in the day, no doubt, it probably had some sort of plastic cap that you stuck into those holes. It's also originally has got these two metal guides for the front and rear derailleur cables. However, there's a bit of rust in those, and so that's going to basically cause friction on any cable that runs through them, because all the paint's gone. But also something I noticed, if I come back up to the top, I also noticed that there was no guide coming up to the front derailleur, up to our derailleur bolt, which is there, which obviously then, when it's functioning and it's pulled, would obviously be pulled down and do that, i.e. bring that front derailleur over and move the chain out onto the bigger cog on the outside. So yeah, that guide, that's the limit I think of this phone's zoom. That little guide, if I can just show you there, you can just see in the bottom, didn't exist. So the cable would have had to basically wrap around the frame, and there was a little groove literally in the paint in the frame where historically it obviously came up and went into this nut, retaining nut here. So obviously again, that's not going to be any good for for the wear of the actual cable itself. So what I've done is I've found this old, come back underneath again, this old plastic guide, and it fit just nicely between the rusty old pair of cable guides
that were welded onto the frame or brazed onto the frame in the past. And all I've done there is I've literally stuck that on with CT1, which I use as an electrician quite a lot. It's kind of like a glue cum sealant. And I've also stuck on this piece of rubber over the hole here using CT1 again to offer a bit of protection to the bottom bracket and close that area in. Now, you think to yourself, well, a bit of CT1 there, that might, eventually drop off, blah, blah, blah. Well, number one, it's incredibly sticky. But if you think about it, once the cables are actually in there and are pulling up to the frame, once the cable is in, once both the cables are in, one of them is going to be pulling up with a lot of tension on it into the front derailleur, and the other one comes across here through this little last piece of cable sleeve here into the rear derailleur. That's going to have tension on it. So you're going to have two lots of cables with upward tension, if you like, because obviously you've got this kind of triangle V here. So you're going to have two cables with upward tension onto that plastic guide. And I don't think that guides are going to go anywhere. So so I think we're pretty safe in the use of that. And at the end of the day, it's going to protect the cables and to some degree the frame, although I'm not really that bothered about that. But hopefully should give us a bit more cable life. So if we take it's a bit difficult to hold the phone and do this one-handed, but I'm going to try my best. I'm still learning at this video-y stuff. I could probably do with some sort of head-mounted unit to take this, but you see how that just pops in there. Dead simple, this. Runs under the guide. And then we want the cable to go through the left-hand, apologies for wiggling this about, so the left-hand cable guide, thus. Okay, so hopefully I'll be able to see it go through. There it goes. Okay, get a better shot of that under there. Yeah, so you see how it's going through that guide there, which is like a tube, so it's not going to drop off the bottom. And then I'll pull that all the way through. Okay, and then so here we're going to put it through this outer cable guide, which I've literally just stuck in just to so I wouldn't lose it. And this is a new bit of outer gear cable, but what I've done is I've found two retro cap ends because they're necessary. Number one, because the stop end on this braceless frame is pretty tiny, so you need that kind of corresponding back in the day cable outer end to go into it. So I've managed to find one of those in my box of millions of bits, and then at the other side got a similar scenario where I've got another little end that seems to fit into the rear derailleur quite nicely, and will stop the outer cable being pulled through that hole. So our outer will sit into that quite nicely. So I'm just going to switch this off a second and thread that all through, and then that is going to go down into our retaining nut. Thus it's going to go, the cable is going to go down in between there, and then we're going to tighten that nut up, and it will obviously press plate to plate, crush the cable onto there, and that'll be retained. So let's give that a go. Okay, so let's now I've got that threaded through, let's present that outer into his little slot there. Got the inner cable coming down, like I said, behind this little washer, which has got this beautifully engineered little notch that goes between this groove, this natural groove in the rear derailleur. This is such a beautiful casting. This is. I can't help but marvel at this old stuff. It is just aesthetically beautiful. There is actually a little tiny ridge in this kind of washer plate that is designed to take and capture that cable and give it the correct position. So I'm just going to attempt to get that in there now. So I just need to, what's this, an 8mm. So I'm literally just going to make sure that my shifter is all the way back, and I'm just going to offer some tension on this cable. Don't need to go mad with a big pair of pliers or anything else, but I'm just pulling down this cable with one hand whilst tightening this plate and onto the cable end. Trying to get that into its groove, which is easier said than done, actually, it seems. Well, let's give that a go. Okay, so I'm not going to dress that cable or snip it just yet. And let's see if we've got sufficient tension in that cable to move my rear derailleur. So I'm going to operate the shifter now, just pulling that back, and there we go. If I just move the jockey wheels out of the way, the cage, and just watching where that goes to. Yeah, and that's giving me a full range of movement backwards and forwards. So I think I've had some outer cable. Often when you do that for the first time, you know, any outer cable that's got to squeeze itself into the end caps, this, that and the other, you know, for the first time we're doing that, you often will work some playback into the cable, which it has done on this occasion. So I'm just going to undo that again. I've got lots of cable to play with, so I'm just going to wrap that around my hand a little bit. Get some bit more tension on this cable this time. Pull the tension out that has released itself through our first attempt. Give that a good nip this time. Let's have another look. So again, I'll put the jockey wheel cage down out of the way, and that's moving nicely backwards and forwards as I pull the lever. And yeah, so that's going all the way nicely to in line with our back cog. So our chain will jump up onto that back cog, and I'm also having a look at the back end of this cage, the jockey wheel cage, to make sure that that's not in the way of any spokes, and it's got a good 3 or 4 mil clearance on the back of that, so which is great. And there's not what they call a B screw on this rear derailleur like you get on more modern derailleurs. The B screw allowing you to, as you screw the B screw in, the idea is that it draws that derailleur back on its pivot bolt like that, and you know, you can set it at a certain place. On modern derailleurs, that top jockey wheel has got a habit of being a lot closer to the cassette, and there's, you know, a set position for it that you put the B screw in, so that jockey wheel is just the right distance from the bottom of the cassette. But this hasn't got the complication of that. The only negative side being is that when we put the chain on, there's nothing to play with in terms of the B screw. Although it has got a set position it should be in, can also be used just to draw out the chain if there's for a sweet spot between the chain adequately pulling that rear derailleur jockey wheel cage, putting a bit of tension in that cage if you're on a crossover small to small cog, and equally having the correct distance between the jockey wheel and this big cog when it's on crossover big to big ring the other way. I'll go into more detail on that when I'm putting the chain on, but we haven't got that adjustment, so we're just going to have to hope that we can get that right just by putting just the correct amount of links in. Anyway, I'm going to snip this now, and we can put a cable end onto that. So, okay, so what am I doing? Snip first, Matt, that'd be a good idea. I'm going to leave a little bit of length on this, just, I don't know, give myself something to play with. And then put that cable end on there, which will stop it fraying. And that just gets if I can get my tool in with where I've snipped that, which I don't think I will, so I think I'm going to have to bring that up actually. And now get the tool in. There you go. And I'm just going to give that aluminium end stop a right good old squeeze, and that'll tighten that onto the cable. And like I say, just keeps it tidy, stops it from all fraying, and yeah, gives it a nice finish.